So, this is an evaluation of my prelim stuff. It's a blog type thing. I apologise, it is nothing amazing. The lighting is terrible because I'm in my room and I don't have any fancy lighting, and the camera's not brilliant because it's only on my computer. But the thing is, I obviously go to Berlin on Monday, so I unfortunately can't do amazingly fancy things. So, prelim. How did it go? This was my first ever thing like that. I've never used a camera before. I've never used editing stuff like that before. When I did GCSE stuff last year, we did magazines, so it was all Photoshop work and stuff, which I can do perfectly now, the amount of time I spent on that. So yeah, group had Tom and Kit in it. At the beginning, I don't really know either of them. Obviously, Kit was in my English, but I never really properly spoke to him, so it was quite fun to work with people I'd never really talked to again. You know, got me involved in the whole class, as you do. Some of the ideas we came up to start with were ridiculously stupid. I think we came up with clowns. So we wanted something quite obscure. We wanted something different. We wanted something that would sort of scare people. We wanted the fear factor. We wanted high tension, high drama. We didn't want one of those sort of thrillers that aren't really thriller. We were going borderline horror rather than thriller. To be honest, we think it worked quite well. The idea was quite good. Once we had started getting an idea together, everything just flowed. The planning worked quite well. I did the little storyboard for it, made a little timeline of shots that we wanted. I storyboarded it and it was all fine. We decided which ones were going to be high angle, which ones were going to be low angle, and how all that all worked. I think one of our most successful shots is where we physically put a camera under the stairs. And that was not easy to film because I had to crouch under it, being that I was the shortest. Yeah, I did freak out some year 8s because they looked down and they saw someone under the stairs, so that was a highlight of filming. I think that shot worked really quite well. The original idea for that shot was meant to be a flashback, along with a corridor shot, which was horribly, horribly painful to do because obviously we had the whole problems with the whole handheld thing, and it just didn't work very well. We couldn't even stabilize it. So yeah, they were originally meant to be flashbacks, but when we actually put them into the whole editing thing and we turned the black and white and we faded them, it just didn't look like a flashback. It just looked completely out of place. So we just decided that we were going to have him running down the stairs, running down a corridor, getting into the room. I don't even remember if we used the corridor shot in the end. I really don't remember. If we did, it's in there. So yeah, it's running down the room, running into the room, you know, and then we just played everything else out chronologically. I think a shot that didn't really work very well was the hand in the glove shot. I think it could have been a lot better, but we didn't really know how to film it because I had to put latex gloves on right in front of the camera, so it looked like a point of view shot from me putting the gloves on, holding the knife. So the audience could see that, oh, there's danger, but you can still see Tom in the shot. It was quite awkward to try and get my hands around the camera. I ended up practically hugging the camera. And that, and obviously we needed the snap to get his reaction, and we had to really get that timing right, otherwise it just didn't look right. And I don't think the second one looked as good because we had the snap and then we have me fiddling with the knife. I think we left that bit in, or we might have taken that out in the end. Difficult to tell because I haven't seen my prelim for like 2 days now, but this is the best I can do at the moment. I think we actually took that out in the end, which I think worked a lot better because then we had a quick reaction straight after and straight after. So that was that. Yeah, I don't think that shot worked too well. Overall, the entire piece was far too dark. That's the criticism our teacher gave us. and she thought that the ending could have been a lot more powerful. Because basically at the end we see Tom run past some like frosted glass. Then you see me come up to it with the fake knife and sort of tap on the screen on the glass with it. But what we decided to do was take away the image for the last 2 taps of the screen, because there's 3, and just have a black screen. The advice given to us there was to really increase the music at that point, really get it really sort of fast-paced, heavy, just to really emphasise the danger that was going on there, whereas really we had stuck with the same soundtrack we've had since the moment I was seen in the piece, which was called Nightmare, quite fittingly. Shot I do think worked really well though was a low angle, well, it was a point of view shot rather than a low angle shot, of just my feet. I think that and the laughter together worked really well with audio. It was kind of menacing, and you could see that the audience could tell that something was going to happen, but you didn't really know whether Tom was going to get caught. You didn't really know whether I was anywhere near him. You didn't know. Which I think worked quite well in the end. Personally, I loved playing the role of the menacing, crazy female. I thought it worked really well. I thought it was a twist on conventions of the thriller genre, because most villains, most monsters, most everything that's negative in films are male. And in this one, we had a crazy female with a knife. And I think that worked quite well, because I think for the female to pull it off, it had to be creepy and it had to be scary and she had to act deranged. And I think I pulled that off. The only problem I have now is the fact that I laugh so much within it that has now shifted to my natural laugh. So now I'm just creeping people out. Yeah. The use of the fake knife, I think, took away from it a little bit, because I made the best that I could. It's made out of cardboard, paint, paper, and some tin foil, so it doesn't look the most realistic, I will be honest, but it was the best we could have done in the short space of times we had, because we weren't allowed to use, obviously, a real knife, because there was a massive little hoo-ha over that. Oh, that was fun. Location-wise, I think we went quite well. In all honesty, I think if we had more time, if it was like the final thing, we would have probably modified the classroom a bit better. We'd have seen if we could have got the bits of work taken off down the wall. We probably wouldn't have used a classroom, but more of a derelict sort of room somewhere, somehow. Possibly a warehouse might have worked quite nicely for it. That could have worked a bit better than a classroom. However, I did like the use of keeping the tables there. We did have a bit of debate about this, whether we should keep the tables and the chairs there, because then that obviously brings up the questions: why are they in a school? Why is he in a school? Why is she in a school? What kind of school is it? Is it meant to look like a school, or have we not just paid attention to mise en scène? I think by leaving a couple of the tables in the shot, you kind of got the isolation, like the isolated, you were trapped. And it posed quite a good obstacle when trying to get away from the female character. So that was always a plus, because we could have him crawl under the tables and get out that way, which means he didn't physically have to pass me, which would have made me catching him a lot easier. So I think that kind of worked in that sense. Yeah, so mainly with filming, the bits that we sort of needed to work on was probably lighting, making sure there wasn't like the camera shadow in a couple of the shots. And yeah, just generally that. I think performance wasn't too bad. I'm not just saying that because I was in it. I didn't really have to do a lot. I had to stand in a corner and hold a knife and laugh and do a bit of walking. I think Tom was quite good. It did take us a couple of takes sometimes because we just, just things went wrong and it was just funny. And that, I think the minimal dialogue was quite good. I think the fact that I never actually spoke was quite nice. Raising enigma codes and all. So yeah, that was a plus point we were told when we did the peer viewing of our piece that we raised Enigma codes, which is a really important convention of a thriller. So that's always good. Really, people wanted to know why I was chasing him. Who was I? Why was Tom running from me? What had Tom done? Why did I have a knife? Why was I insane? Why did I laugh? Why did I never speak? Why was I in heels? What's with the gloves? Do I have sort of some hygiene problem with blood, or was it to make it look more menacing? I don't really know. I think the codes of dress worked quite nicely. I was in pretty much complete black, which is pretty easy for me to do. I love wearing black, so that was pretty easy. I was in a dress which obviously showed it was female. I think the heels added to the fact that it was female, because the only other way you could see it was a bit of nail varnish and the ring on my finger. And if an audience wasn't paying so much close attention to stuff like that, they might not have figured it was female, and apart from the laugh. But I think it's important to show gender through the mise-en-scène and codes of dress rather than just through dialogue and the more obvious signs. So that's all good. Tom was in a suit, which again raised questions. Why is he in a suit? Why is it so pristine? Blah, blah, blah. It wasn't quite pristine. It was a little bit messed up. It's a teenage suit, as it does. Do feel a bit sorry for him, because we made him wear his suit like 3 days in a row for filming. So I do feel a tad sorry for the guy. So I think that worked quite well. Kit was very good behind camera. Originally we thought it was a brilliant idea for Tom and me to act in it, but then we figured it was going to leave a lot for Kit to do. But to be honest, when it actually came to filming it, Tom is in most of the shots, so me and Kit always had me to second a shot if he wanted a different approach on it. I could there do some lighting, just general stuff really that takes sort of importance in filming. Yeah, so I think filming was pretty productive. It took us quite a while to do because we accidentally recorded over some of our footage, but we all put as much time as we could. We used our studies and I used my freeze, and so I think filming went pretty well. Yeah, the only thing I would say is that we needed a slightly better location, but within the time frame there wasn't a lot we could have done about that. And yeah, the lighting. I think the lighting was the major thing when it came to filming, because on the camera it looked light enough. When you bring it out into editing, it looks slightly darker, and then when you play it back on a big screen, it looked really dark. So I think that's a really important point that we've learned for next time, for our big piece. So overall, I think the team actually worked quite well together. We came up with very similar ideas. I think it did work. So that is all good. Editing itself was quite interesting because I'd never ever done anything like that before, and nor had Kit. It was only really Tom that had ever done anything. But as I said, I spent quite a few of my frees down there because I had a study with Tom and I had a couple of frees with Kit. So I just spent as much time as I could in there trying to get it done. We mainly just sort of put all the shots together. It was at this point that we figured that the flashbacks weren't working. We tried them in black and white, we tried fading. It just didn't really work for us. We didn't like it. So we decided at this point to put them in chronological order. I think the biggest problem with editing was knowing the exact place to cut it to make the cuts look sort of quite good. There's a couple I was not happy with near the end of the sequence. I didn't think they cut very nicely, and it did annoy me, but when it came down to it in the end, we didn't have time to really get them down to a single frame. So that's probably about the only thing with editing. I think it took us a little while to figure out which buttons did which, but that's because none of us had really used this program in depth before. So that was that. Obviously, Kit is quite musically sort of talented, so we allowed him to do soundtrack because it's sort of his expertise. He came up with 2 great soundtracks. We had a really sort of sort of like a drone sound for the beginning of it, which just set sort of a pace. It was like, there's a little bit of danger, you know, be careful, why is he running, all building tension. And then the moment I laughed, there was like, it was almost like piercing, it was almost like a take on Psycho. It was very high pitched and it just sort of sounded like a waterfall of like screeching. That's probably one of the worst metaphors I've ever used, but it kind of was, and I think that sort of summed up me quite nicely. I was quite an insane character in this, so I think that worked. The only way, as I said earlier, we could have improved with the sound was to make it a bit more sort of dramatic near the end, to show that there was a chase going on, to show that I was dangerous and menacing and I had a knife. So I think that was pretty cool. Yeah, we didn't really have many issues with editing. I think the biggest issue we probably had was trying to stabilize a shot, because we tried it with dolly shots, we tried it with handheld shots, and it just did not work at all. So in the end, we just took the very few beginning seconds of one of the handheld shots before it went absolutely crazy. So we did get the handheld a feel, but not so it was ridiculously stupid like the rest of the shot was. That did take us a lot when we were filming. It was a huge problem. But in the end, we managed to figure that out, so that was all fine. We didn't really do. I don't think we hit many major obstacles. I think the only thing I'd have liked with the whole editing process would have been to have a little bit more time to play around with some special effects, really, because we only really glanced through it for a couple of black and white things, which we then reverted back to colour because the flashbacks didn't work. So I think that's a bit of an issue. I'd have liked to have played around that with a lot more, especially watching other people's where they'd used like the blur effect and the distort and like the shadows and stuff like that. I think that could have enhanced ours a bit. But we learned from the prelim. That's what the prelim's for. So that's all of that. What else? Overall, the final piece, I think it worked quite well. I think it was quite a menacing piece of work. I think it was one of those more scarier thrillers, more like Psycho in a Hitchcock film, rather than something more psychological or something more like, like Donnie Darko or stuff like Inception, where it just plays with your mind rather than actual physical danger equals tension in audience where it's drawn out and drawn out and drawn out. I think that was probably the biggest plus point of our plot, is you didn't actually see me get Tom. You saw him running, which would mean he assumed that he's running from something, but then I'm in the same room as him, so is he running from something else? Is he running from me and just doesn't know I'm ahead of him? And then obviously I continue to chase him afterwards. And I seem pretty cool and collect about it, so I'm expecting this to go on. I'm enjoying this. He is frantically running away, and I'm not frantically trying to get rid of him as a character. I'm enjoying this. I'm letting it draw out. So I think the tension was built up slowly. I think the tension could continue. If it continued into an entire film, I think it had the possibilities to do that. So I think the plot idea was pretty good. We had a clean knife as well, and the gloves were clean, which shows that I hadn't hurt anyone before, which I think made it was a little bit like, oh, something is going to happen because nothing's previously happened. So that's always a good thing to do. So overall, I think the piece was pretty good. Obviously, lighting was a key thing, but we learn from our mistakes. This is how life works, really. So that's all of that. Individually, I think I worked quite well. I contributed in the planning stages. Obviously, I drafted out the storyboard, mainly because I'm the artistic one, and I'm the one that can draw, which is always a problem when people give me stuff to draw, because it has to look right. Other people can just draw stick men and it can be fine. I actually have to make it look vaguely right, because stuff like that annoys me. I spent a lot of my time I spent some frees and some studies, filming and editing and stuff like that. I spent a couple of lunch times as well, so that was all fine. I think I contributed quite well to this whole project. Um, hmm. The main thing I think we've learned is about lighting. I think lighting was a huge letdown for this piece. But we now know that things come out a lot darker, which is obviously a learning curve. I'd rather learn it now than learn it in my real piece. So this is kind of a success. I'm kind of glad things weren't perfect the first time round. Otherwise, there's no point doing a prelim piece if everything's going to be perfect all right first time round, is there? So that's cool. I've also obviously learned properly how to use the cameras, how to adapt to them, which shots work quite well, the zooms look a little bit tacky, and I've learned how to look into a frame, check things that shouldn't be there aren't in the frame. And then obviously you've got like the whole editing thing. I now feel comfortable with the editing software. I now feel like I can play around with it and get some really interesting shots and that for next piece, which is gonna be fun. I'm kind of looking forward to the next piece. So yeah, overall, I think our piece obviously was quite good for a first thing that we'd ever done. That we I think we fulfilled the criteria that we needed, and I think we did quite well. Considering everything, I think we did quite well. So hats off to us. Everyone should give themselves a massive pat on the back. So that is my evaluation. I think I've covered everything. If I haven't, I'll probably do a quick update after I get back from Berlin, just to finalise anything that I've forgotten or anything I think about when I'm away. So yeah, this could be good. I'm looking forward to the next stage. However, I'm going to be in Berlin for some of it, but not a lot I can do when history calls. So yeah, evaluation done.